Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Marion Vermeulen. As you all know, the Class 12 projects are a very important part of our Waldorf curriculum. With that being said, I always promised myself that when my turn came to complete a project, I would choose to do something I love. Let me tell you, this was a lot easier said than done. Deciding what to dedicate the next 9 months to felt like a very broad and overwhelming decision. Among all this uncertainty, I was certain of one thing. My project would be based on horses. I've been lucky enough to have been surrounded by horses my whole life. I've owned 2 of my own, which in result has resulted in me having many interactions with equine professionals, such as physiotherapists and veterinarians. Ever since a very young age, I've had a deep love for equine veterinary. I'm one of the rare horse girls who never outgrew their "I'm going to be a vet when I grow up" phase. It's been clear to me all along that I will pursue a career involving horses after school. For my grade 12 project, I decided to delve deeper into equine physiotherapy, hence the scrubs. Due to me not being a professional, I was rather limited as to what I was able to do. But luckily, with the help from a dear friend who happens to be a physio, Nina de Jager, we were able to come up with a project proposal. I would perform basic physiotherapy techniques on 3 different horses twice a week. This assessment would consist of warming up, assessing, and stretching certain areas of the horse's body. These areas being the lumbar area, the glutes, and the hamstrings. I chose to perform this procedure on 3 different horses, all of different ages, breeds, and disciplines. The horses I worked on were Pardon Fanfare, who's a 13-year-old thoroughbred warm blood cross, who mainly events, Diamonds Callistus, a 13-year-old warm blood who show jumps, and then last but definitely not least, a very naughty little Boerbad cross pony called Luna Eclipse, who does a bit of everything. Conveniently, all 3 of these horses were stabled at the riding centre in Howard Bay, where I've been riding my whole life. A treatment session would generally look like this. I would fetch the horses from the paddock and ride them if their owners have asked me to. Once they've cooled down from their ride, I would start the treatment procedure. Firstly, I would warm up each area individually. Post-warm-up, I would assess and take some more notes on whether there might be any pain or tightness in the areas. Once I felt like I had gathered enough information and each horse had an adequate amount of time to release tension, I moved on to the stretching. I performed both passive and active stretches. For those of you who don't know, active stretches are stretches that are defined as using your own muscles to provide resistance. However, passive stretches require an external pulling factor. I made each horse their own folder and spreadsheet. After every session, I would write a review, which consisted of me rating their pain and tightness level out of 5, as well as writing a general note on how they were feeling that day for me to refer back to in future. While completing the practical part of my project, I obviously had to do the research as well, which to my surprise, I thoroughly enjoyed. I researched various aspects of equine physiotherapy, such as the history, the development, many different techniques, assessment procedures, and plenty more. As you can imagine, this was very beneficial to me at the time. Not only was I able to apply all the knowledge I gained every time I worked on a horse, but I was also able to feel a lot more confident knowing I'm well educated about the topic. What made this project so unique and special to me is how individual each horse's progress was. No treatment was ever the same. I also quickly noticed what a huge impact a horse's personality and circumstances will have on their physical well-being. Those who tend to be more stressed, anxious, and under more pressure have a very hard time settling down and being comfortable in their body. This often results in situations like injuries. By me being aware of this, I was able to ensure that each horse was enjoying the time I spent with them as much as I was. I was in the lucky position to ride each of these horses at least once every 2 weeks, which provided me with valuable information on how they were feeling under saddle. I was able to determine whether they might be more sore on the left or right side and whether they are experiencing pain in any specific areas. I took all this information into account while treating them to make sure they were getting the most out of each session. Very early on during the process of the project, I had to part ways with my beloved horse Hunter as he had to retire. This resulted in me developing a very negative mindset towards horses in general. It was very difficult to show up to work on random people's horses every day when you didn't have your own to love anymore. Eventually, I came to terms with the fact that I had made a commitment to these horses and to myself. I simply had to keep going. One afternoon, when I was treating Luna in the pouring rain, I realized just how much I truly love making sure horses and animals are feeling their best. This encouraged me to put my all into the rest of the project. Once my research and practical part of this project was complete, I had quite a bit of time left before this presentation. If there's one thing you should know about me is I cannot just sit around and do nothing. This inspired me to organize a presentation at the Riding Center on equine physiotherapy. I thoroughly enjoyed this and received wonderful comments. I plan on educating myself on various equine topics and hope to present all the knowledge I gain at least once every 3 months in like a semi-formal presentation. Though there are so many lessons that I have learned over the past 9 months, I don't even think I can list them all. There's one that stood out to me the most. I learned there is nothing wrong with not constantly working. I found myself in a state of worry and was comparing myself to my peers the whole time. Eventually, as you can think, this makes you feel like you are never doing enough, and it is truly exhausting. Luckily, a switch happened. I realized that it is completely unnecessary and irrelevant to even consider comparing my progress to anyone else's. These projects are all far simply too individual. This would never have been possible without the amazing people that I find myself surrounded by every day. Which brings me to my next point, possibly the most important, all the acknowledgements. I wasn't sure where to start when it came to thanking all the incredible people who were involved in this journey, so I figured it made most sense to start with my wonderful parents first. Without them, I never would have been involved with horses in the first place. I appreciate their guidance and support more than I ever could put into words. The second person I would like to acknowledge is Sarah Smith, who happens to be the owner of the Riding Center and who's been my instructor for as long as I can remember. Somehow, she always manages to talk sense into me and makes me realize that my current situation is in fact not the end of the world. I was lucky enough to complete this project under the guidance of my two incredible mentors, Emma Campbell and Nina Diache. Emma mainly helped me with the research and the writing part of it, and Nina was an absolute lifesaver when it came to the practical. I will forever cherish all the guidance and reassurance they provide me with, and I take my hat off to them for dealing with my constant chatter, regular meltdowns, and endless concerns. Last, but definitely not least, I would like to say the biggest thank you to my wonderful teachers and friends who guided me the whole way. Without your guys' reassurance and love I received daily, I never would have enjoyed this project as much as I did. My Grade 12 project taught me more than I ever thought any project would. I will forever be grateful for this opportunity and look forward to carrying the knowledge, skills, and experience I gained while completing it with me into the future. I will now show you a short video of what a typical treatment session would look like. Thank you very much.
moment I understood the importance of education was the moment I didn't have access to it. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jen McDonnell, and in 2018, I was taken out of school. My mother never valued education, and which was ironic as she was a preschool teacher. Over the following 3 years, I had no formal education. This gave me a lot of time to think about what type of future I was going to have. With the matric not being in my reach, as I wasn't going to school, I was between two different options. One, run away to Australia with my father, or two, move to a farm with my mother and eventually get kicked out and have to figure out life. Neither were too appealing. Through this period of my time, I felt hopeless. Fortunately enough for me, somebody very special entered my life and saw that I needed the support. And when I reached out, in a matter of 3 weeks, she managed to get me into this school. I remember the nights leading up to my first day here. I would dream about all the types of adventures I'd go on. To put it in context, I had never been to high school before this. I had a grade 6, and now I was entering grade 9, which is an awkward phase to start your high school in. I want to point out the importance and need for education. It gave me the ability to choose my destiny, to choose my future. I went from somebody who thought that they would never have a matric to now wanting to go for medicine. This is the best gift I believe we can give everyone. And this is why I chose my project. So, why I chose my project aside, let me actually explain to you what I did, because I decided to write articles on education. To write these articles, I went around interviewing educators in the Western Cape, specifically Cape Town, because that was the region I had access to. It was the most interesting, amazing conversations I've ever had, but I'm a little bit of a teacher's pet, so it makes sense. My interviews were centered around 3 core questions. Your story as a teacher, your education, what you've been through. What advice would you give to a new teacher? Because at the time I thought, maybe this is something I want to pursue. Turns out, nope. And thirdly, what do you want the future of education to look like in the Western Cape? This was very important to me, as I think this is the only thing I could really offer. Now, a big part of this project was to make it accessible. I did not want to spend any money on this, nor did I have the budget to. And I didn't want people to have to spend money to see this. I believe that education should be free and information should be free. And it feels wrong to say that and then charge people to read my articles. If you want to read my articles, they are all up on my beautiful website. There's a QR code. You're allowed to now and only now take out your phones and scan the QR code. Okay? No flashes. So the actual writing of the articles was probably one of the most brutal experiences I've had. I was super nervous and lacked self-confidence, which is not usual of me. Thank you. It was weird. I remember writing, must be 3 articles before my first one, and just not allowing myself to send it to anybody else, thinking that this is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And then finally, I wrote my first article that I gave to edit. There we go. It was on textbooks and their usefulness in this environment. It was interesting writing this first article, as it taught me a lot about actually writing articles and academics. It also taught me that I absolutely hate in-text referencing. It is the worst thing we have designed ever. It is the best thing when you're researching for articles. However, writing articles, it was my biggest pain. I'd say if there's one hurdle, it was in-text referencing. I spoke quite in-depthly about textbooks, and I don't want to bore everyone too much, and I'm way more passionate about my next article, so if you would like to read it, once again, you can go scan the QR code. The second article I wrote was The Future of Education That Teachers Want. This is the one I really compiled all my interviews and questions together, and I'm very proud of this one. I'll explain a little bit. The surprising finding that I found was that a lot of teachers want to move to more practical work. And as a Waldorf kid, I think it resonated within me, as at Waldorf we do a lot of practical work. And it also made me realize how much theory is being taught without showing. I think in writing there's an old proverb, show, don't tell, and I think we can really bring that into education. It's difficult for kids to understand concepts, much easier for them to see them. But the biggest point that this article made, the biggest point that I found through my interviews that I mentioned in this article, is definitely the lack of communication between educators and the people making these decisions about education. This bridge that needs to be this gap that needs to have a bridge over it is just not there. And it's sad that we have so many people making these decisions that are affecting educators and teachers without properly consulting them first. So, if my story resonates with you at all, or you care about this issue, I have found 2 organizations that are here to support children getting education. I was very fortunate to have somebody who was willing to step in and find me education, send me to a school. Many kids don't have this opportunity and are left without education. Now, before I leave the stage and you get to watch a cool car, I just want to say my thank yous. I want to thank my internal mentor, Andrea, for being pretty much my rock through this project. Every time I felt demotivated and out of the energy to actually do this, she really, every meeting I had, she always gave me that energy and made me go out wanting to go explore more. My father and Nan for driving me to these interviews and sharing my long rants about education that I will not stop, but thank you. My external mentor, Anya, for assisting in editing and a whole bunch of other things, and basically teaching me how to write articles, being my English teacher. And finally, the person who stepped into my life and gave me school, and without her, I wouldn't be here. And that's my stepmother, Tan, who also helped edit the articles, and I can't express my gratitude to her. Thank you.
Switch on my mic.
That was supposed to be a lot more epic, I'm not gonna lie. So, my core has not had a fault like that, and of course the most flippin' important time, it dies on me. So, I haven't named them yet, but flip you. Let me down now, I'm not gonna lie, pal. Yeah. Alright, well, I already introduced myself in that video. Thank you, Jordan Greentree, local car photographer, gave me that, thank you very much. But yeah, I've been a Waldorf student my whole life. Now, these projects have always been seen as the peak of the Waldorf education experience. We are given the freedom to choose a topic of our liking. Although I made my choice all the way back in kindergarten, I've loved anything with a combustion engine for as long as I can remember. It's just one of those things that as a child, one grows an attachment to and is never able to let go. Choosing a topic to do a motorized vehicle was inevitable, But now I had to explore the topic, narrow it down, and define what type of vehicle I would do and what I'd do with it. I decided to define my project as a resto-mod. Resto-mods are beautiful things. A perfect balance between a crazy teen boy's sound system, shiny rims, and an obnoxious exhaust, and the gentrified old boy vintage classic car. Start with the end in mind. My dad was the bank. I went looking for a car to buy. The car I would choose needed a viable resale value, accessible parts, and people who knew how to work on them. Now, I'll cut this section short-ish. As a young man with a little too much freedom and a lack of knowledge of what actually goes into a resto-mod, my self-decided choices were a classic Range Rover, a classic Range Rover, a Porsche 924, and a Chevy C10. I went to have a meeting with a man named Hammy from Mace Autos, and when he heard my choices, he seemed a little shocked and just chuckled and told me to buy a Beetle, a City Golf, or a Classic Mini. Now, I was a little bit wounded when I left that meeting, but I did understand his meaning. So after realizing my fantasy of having a monster V8 diesel or a turbocharged inline 4-cylinder or an indestructible throaty inline V6 was not going to happen, my father and I began looking at smaller options, hence the Mini. Start small. I don't know why my face looks like that. A man named Anthony from Motor Village hooked me up with a Classic Mini. Now, the Mini was quite the opposite of my original choice, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that when I laid my eyes on it for the first time, I was quite intrigued. It was so small and had so much character, as well as an extremely rich history in the rally racing world, which shocked me. Yes, and then along with its really truly just being an amazing car, if I were to buy this Mini through Anthony and Motor Village, it seemed they were willing to give me free space to work on my car, so they basically sponsored me. Now, this was the best deal I'd heard all year, as a space to work on my car was one of our biggest problems. Now, anyone who knows me, I live on steps. I have no garage, so that was a really big issue. So this was the best thing I'd heard all year. So after going to see the Mini, my father and I, perhaps a little too spontaneously, bought the Mini, but I mean, at the end of the day, we really truly have no regrets. I'm really in love with that thing. Siraz from Motor Village and I collected the Mini from Gordons Bay and brought it back to Motor Village on the 14th of November, 2023. Now, when I decided to do a car for my project, I knew it would be challenging. So I set myself a task. Get the Mini mechanically sound. Forget about all those bells and whistles. That'll come later. What I had planned was to buy one Sparco bucket racing seat and a Momo steering wheel and call it a day. So, very tentatively, I entered my first phase of my on-hand part of my project, the engine removal. I only started working on my Mini on the 1st of December, 2023. I was lent a toolkit and an engine lift from Warner, so it was all set. I'd never done this before, so lack of experience meant very slow progress. I used common sense, my Haynes manuals, and YouTube as my teachers, and I managed to recruit a very enthusiastic and respectably mechanically capable mate of mine, Luca Bramwell, who I'm afraid is not here tonight, to assist with the engine extraction. I also found out that a family friend of ours was very mechanically inclined, Andy, and I asked him to take the position of my external mentor. He agreed, and he helped guide me and Luca through the process, as well as lent us some very important items like the car jack and jack stands. Once we had stripped down the engine and taken out the drive shafts and tied a rope around the engine, I attached the rope to a chain of my hydraulic lift, and we began to crank the lever to take the engine out. Now, at first we thought it was all going well and smoothly until we started cranking and the whole Mini started lifting off the floor. We hadn't detached one of the engine braces. But once the engine was out of the Mini and on the tire, I felt a lot of relief. I then went off to enjoy an absolutely fabulous holiday and started writing my essay and journal before the important events took a stroll out of memory lane. Now, I'll cut this. Ooh, that's my last part. 2024, right. Oh golly, the year that a lot happened. I got back and got straight to work. I sent my engine off for diagnostics, where it sat in a queue and wasn't touched for a solid month and a bit. I was very disappointed by these engineers. As I was on a search for a second external mentor, who was a mini specialist, word got around, and I received the number of Roy Hilton Roberts. Unfortunately, also not here tonight, but he's the man behind the mask. I received his number from my mate Dylan Gray's uncle. After I introduced myself and what I was doing, he was very open to help. I still had lots to do on the mini, there's Roy. I still had lots to do on the mini at Motor Village, but the problem was the engine. Roy knew from experience that quite often these engineering firms make errors on classic mini engines, especially if the client, like me, is seriously inexperienced and doesn't even know what to ask for. Roy offered to rebuild my engine and for me to be involved in the process, and that was one of the most important things, is I did not want to send this car to be done for me. I wanted to be part of the process. So, by a stroke of luck and chance, I'd found myself a mini specialist. I was very relieved, as when it comes to a niche car build like mine, you want someone who knows the car in and out, and has a true passion for these vehicles. Roy has built, driven, and raced minis since he was 14 and 15, all the way in South America, then the UK, and now he's in South Africa. Thank God for that. He has been working on them for over 46 years. At the beginning of 2024, I was lost, but now it was the 1st of March, and things were set. My Mini's engine was at Roy, disassembled, as well as diagnosed in just a week. My engine, after sitting for a very, very long time, had still the oil in it, and unfortunately, as it was in the yard, had water, and therefore thoroughly rusted. It needed a full rebuild. That meant that I had a lot of time, and I didn't want to spend it all writing. I met with Andy to discuss what to do with this time, and he said, "Sam, if it's worth doing properly." With that in my mind, I began to strip the Mini until it was a bare shell. In this next stage, the Mini needed transport, and very graciously, that shouldn't be there. I took out the subframes and got them cleaned. I sent the Minis off for rust work and a protective coating. That's how the interior looked. That's how it looked afterwards. And a protective coating. As the labor, if I did it myself, would have taken me over 3 weeks easily due to school. Roy assisted in restoring my brakes and suspensions and started to rebuild my engine after it came back from being rebored. Yes, alright. Again, the engine was then finished by Roy, and I put it back in the Mini. Soon after, parts arrived from the UK, and we put them all in the car. Oops, there's the mostly exhaust installation. A few weeks later, the car started up, and Mark Levy from Motor Village once again came to help me. He picked up the car and dropped it off at Motor Village. Now, once again, Roy, along with my father, thank you Dad, came to my rescue as I was at home writing this speech. This was on Tuesday. And fitted any last bits, like the grill and my hooter, and then in the last 3 days, Wednesday and Thursday, my upholstery was fitted. Yes, Wednesday and Thursday this week. That was also, that's not supposed to be there. And then, so brilliant plan, right? On Thursday evening, I planned a whole photo shoot. I invited tons of people to come for this whole release of the car and everything with a curtain on it, all that shenanigans, and it wasn't done. So, I don't know if anybody was disappointed, but I'll apologize now. I was so happy, my emotional intelligence was out the window. All I could see was a beautiful Mini. So I was very happy, but I apologize. What I promised didn't really fall through. But we still took some really nice pictures, so you can just look at those for now. We did do another photo shoot this morning, believe it or not, because we were desperate for this content. We both agreed that this would really make the project whole, and that's what you saw this morning. That was shot and produced today, in the last 8 hours. So thank you, Jordan. On to the next section. Next and last, don't worry guys. Quite unexpectedly, the main part of my project wasn't all about restoring the Mini. It has become clearer each day that towards the end of this project, I hardly thought about the actual car, but rather what to do, what I did, how to do it, how I did it, why I'm doing it, and why I did it. What is and what was on my mind are the lessons that I've learned daily. Lessons like project managing, compromising, delegation of tasks, creating relationships with people that are beneficial due to their access to material, information, networking, and ingenuity. I call that Mini. I thank my Twitcher friend, Twitcher is a nickname for a birder, friend, Luke Summers, for helping me invent that acronym, as I had it as TANK. And that hardly relates to Mini, although the irony is quite good. Using this methodology, I managed to collect a group of really wonderful people, people that are in this room right now. With these relationships, both tend to benefit equally. You are given something of worth, so you give back something of worth. But it was different in my situation. I was constantly being given, but I needed to have the knowledge or the skills to give back. In the beginning, I was frustrated by this fact, but when I learned that it was just my pride, I had to leave my frustration behind. It was a silly thing to get frustrated by and a waste of energy. I had to realize that I was at the bottom, rock bottom of the hierarchy, especially the experience hierarchy. And although I didn't have anything to give back to match the value of what I was being given, that was okay. I'm not on these guys' level. What I needed to do was become a sponge, to suck up every single last bit of information that I was being given. Never say no to a conversation, always be inquisitive and ask questions. Don't speak, but rather listen. And if you do speak, only say things that matter. Don't just blabber on and waffle. They don't like that. And finally, I needed to be respectful and respectable, a good listener. It was always yes and thank you, never no but, yes but, although yes and was a respected answer. It has been such a privilege to work alongside some really interesting and inspiring people. It has broadened my understanding of the outside world and of how intense the work world and business environments can be. I would like to thank Motor Village and its crew, who I'm afraid aren't here tonight. I would not have met so many kind and interesting people in the car community if it weren't for my time spent at Motor Village. For that, the help, and the space to start my project off, I am beyond grateful. I want to thank Roy formally. I'm very sad he's not here. You guys would love him. He's a lovely man. I would love to thank him formally for being so approachable, thoughtful, and most importantly, honest. Honesty is something I value above all throughout this project. This project would not have happened without him, and I would not have been able to have such an amazing experience. All right. And then, of course, I would like to thank Warner for the tools and his gift. And I want to thank Andy for getting me off the ground and running when an extremely important phase. I would also like to thank my internal mentor, Marcus, for helping me in these last few stages and giving me tips. And lastly, but most importantly, I would love to thank my parents. I am beyond privileged to have an opportunity like this, and the funding for this project was immense. My father has been absolutely wonderful dad throughout this process, and the car is his as much as mine, although I don't think I have to tell him that. I want to thank my mother, as she has been a constant stone and held me down when things got crazy, and they did. Thank you very much for being here tonight, and have a lovely rest of the evening.
I have always been fascinated by people, how we are all so focused on our individual lives and journeys, the ways in which we perceive and separate one another. I wondered why it is and how it came to be that so much emphasis is placed on how we are different and not how we are similar. In a world riddled by segregation, oppression, discrimination, and overall disconnect, it is integral to celebrate diversity and to encourage individuality and self-expression wherever applicable. However, I believe that in today's world, so much emphasis is placed on destigmatizing individuality that people tend to overlook the things that we have in common and unite us as human beings. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rosie, and for my grade 12 project, I decided to combat the disconnect that is evident in our world today by asking the question, what is something that all humans have in common? Using this as my narrative to design a coffee table book. Over the past 6 months, I've strolled the coast of my home, False Bay, camera in hand, capturing beautiful moments between people and collecting responses to that exact question. From the collected responses, I would select my favorites to be quoted and paired with photos that I felt conveyed a similar message. And together, these two components would form my book's narrative, that we are all connected in a way that is unable to be disentangled, no matter our differences. We are inextricably connected. At the start of this process, before I had decided on my theme or how I was going to display my final product, I was set on one thing, and that was that I wanted to explore photography. Although I did not have much technical knowledge on the topic, actually none whatsoever, photography is something that I have always admired and felt very drawn to. Often in my day-to-day life, I would observe the world around me and wish that I could capture precise moments by means of taking photos through my eyes. This is what led me to my admiration of street photography. This completely candid, raw way of portraying a story resonated deeply with me, and I knew it was something that I wanted to explore further. When I had decided on my theme of human connectivity, this style of photography proved to be the perfect choice. I knew from the start that my chosen medium, as well as my subject matter, would pose many obstacles for me. The one that was most obvious from the beginning was that I did not have a camera, nor the funds to buy one. Furthermore, I had no previous experience being behind the lens. Luckily, my sister had a camera and she agreed to let me borrow it for the duration of the project. Of course, on condition that I guarded it with my life. The camera was the perfect entry-level camera, a Canon EOS 2000D. Not the top of the range, but one that was perfectly capable of creating beautiful images. As for experience, this is something gained over time. Time was not something I had a lot of, but I was fortunate enough to get a very good discount on 2 online courses. The first being a digital photography course for beginners, which went into depth about all the basics: composition, exposure, white balance, focus, etc. The second was a street photography specific course, which explained how to convey a story through your imagery, as well as how to use backgrounds and subjects in your composition in order to create a narrative. The street photography course also had a short segment on editing, which proved to be highly useful in the later stages of my project. For any other questions or any confusion I had, Google and YouTube became highly frequently visited resources. The rest of the project, however, was all on me. I learned via trial and error, perhaps more emphasis on the error part. And still, at the end of this process, I feel I do not know all that much. I still feel a little bit like a fish out of water in the world of photography. If I had had more time, I probably would have crammed more knowledge about all the technical details and played around with more techniques and so on. But there were so many aspects to creating my final product that I had to learn about other things too. At the end of this process, what I can say is that I know how to effectively edit photos, how to design a flyer, how to edit and design a book, how to talk to people, and yes, the rough basics of how to operate a camera. Now, something you should know about me is that I'm rather reserved when it comes to interacting with strangers. And I therefore assumed at the beginning of this process that this final presentation of my project, this speech, would be the hardest part for me. At that point, I don't think I had at all considered that both my theme and my photographs were solely human-focused. To say the least, this entire project pushed me far from my comfort zone from start to finish. There were times where I found myself incapable of talking to people or to go out with a camera because I felt too exposed. Excuse the pun. But I persevered because I was adamant to complete the process. I also knew the theme was something that I was truly passionate about, and this passion, in turn, fueled my perseverance. I really wanted the end product to be something of high quality and that held meaning to me, not just me, but anyone who looks at it. And for this to be the case, it meant I actually had to put my all into it and bite the bullet and talk to people. I did find a way to somewhat minimize the amount of talking I had to do. I made a Google form where people could submit answers to my question online anonymously. Therefore, rather than only conducting interviews, which I'm sad to say I actually only conducted 2.5 successfully, but I also passed out flyers, which explained my project and had a QR code linked to the Google form, meaning that all I had to do was approach people and hand them the flyer. This is how I ended up receiving a majority of my responses that are now in my book. This did not make the process that much easier, but it did make me a fraction calmer when approaching people, as I didn't have to worry about waiting for people to formulate their answers and then asking if I could record them. On this theme of asking for permission, I was met with a similar conflict in regards to my photographs. Because street photography is all about candid photos of everyday life, it is often the case that the subjects are not even aware that their photos are being taken. This led me down a rabbit hole of whether it was morally and legally right to be taking photos of people without their consent. There may sound like there is an obvious answer to this question. Of course you need permission, right? Well, you see, it wasn't that obvious for me. I had been struggling so much already with the interaction part of this project that just the thought of having to go out and talk to more people made me feel slightly ill. So I started my research, and I discovered that finding a finite answer to this question was not exactly easy, as there are very few photography-specific laws in South Africa. After reading many articles and on the experiences from other photographers and lawyers, I found that it was in fact deemed legally okay. For in South Africa, there are no laws prohibiting taking photos as long as the subjects are in a public setting. This means in places such as streets, parks, on public transport, one is free to click away as one pleases, without release forms. There are, of course, exceptions. For example, if you take a photo of someone in a compromised state or in a public bathroom, you are definitely fair game to be sued. There are also many other smaller regulations and guidelines, such as what are the photos being used for, whether that be commercial use or for a fine arts project. I won't go too much into all the research now, but what I did conclude from all of it was that context and intention can take one a long way in deciphering right from wrong in these scenarios. My intention with this project was to show the beauty that is in everyone, and I therefore decided for myself to not go the route of release forms. I was very conscious of not being too invasive when behind the lens, which meant it turned out that most of my photos did not have an identifiable subject anyways. Like most things in life, not much went exactly as I initially envisioned, much to my dismay. There were many things that I could have done differently and ways in which I could have minimized errors. And although there are even some errors in my final book, not that you need to know that, but and some of my photos did not turn out how I would have liked. Today, at the end of this process, I have something to show for my work, and for that I am very proud. I know many people say this, but I truly did not understand why these projects are such an important part of the Waldorf curriculum until I participated in them myself. I now realize that they are important because they teach you how to overcome rough patches and persevere, dealing with mistakes, learning to enjoy the things you may have once found daunting, and doing it all independently. And then finally, possibly one of the most important life skills I learned from all of this, to at the end of it all, be able to stand by your work and own what you have done, much like I am doing now. I would now like to show you some of my favorite pages of my book, so that instead of me yapping on all night long, you can actually see what I've done. I will read the quotes for you in case not everyone is able to see them from where you're sitting. And I would just like to reiterate that all of these quotes are taken from other people's words, and I think it's very important that one thinks about this when you either read them or listen to me say them now, because it really formulates my theme. Cool. Okay. I think one definite thing that humans have in common is the fact that we are all different. We live separate, completely unique lives and experiences every day. And although it can feel isolating, it is one of my favorite things about being human. We all need each other in every sphere of life, physical, mental, and spiritual. in harmony with nature. We are all living together on this treacherous yet beautiful planet. We are all experiencing the world as it continues on its endless trajectory of change. I also think every human enjoys putting on a nice warm pair of socks, but that could just be me. We are all infinitely divine beings, crammed into a 3D body that are totally unaware of their inner magnificence. All humans need a companion. I do feel connected to all people, but in a soft, hazy way. I smile at everyone I walk past, and the smile back is euphoric, like honey. I feel so joyful when people smile first. I always have to remind myself that everyone is living with their head in their own sphere, with a completely different perception of existence to me. But a smile back is a lovely reaction. I know I passed someone similar to me. Those are just a few of my favorite pages. If you want to see the rest, please come check out my stand. It's in that corner. I am also selling prints, not my book, because it was very expensive to make. And I would like to end off with just some thanks to people who really helped make this project possible. Firstly, to my family, to my mom for coming with me every single time I went to go take photos, whether that be at ungodly hours of the morning. To my sister for lending me her camera and helping me with all the editing and designing of both the flyer and also my book. To my dad who sponsored this entire journey, thanks Dad. To my friends and classmates for the unconditional support throughout. To Natalie Sternberg, who isn't actually here tonight, for helping me with the initial stages of this project. To my internal mentor, Kim, I'm not sure where you are, but thank you so much. You have really been my rock throughout and helped me through every single part of this project. I really appreciate you. And finally, to everyone who participated in this project, whether that be submitting answers to my form or just giving me the time of day when I disturbed them on the streets. Even the people in my photos, whether or not they know they are in the photos, I really appreciate them being there. And to all of you for being a lovely audience. I hope you enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you.
Jewelry is like a perfect spice. It complements what's already there. Jewelry is a physical reminder of our memories. Jewelry has the power to be the one little thing that makes us feel unique. Good evening. My name is Lauren, and I present to you Difference Through Design. Every piece of jewelry tells a story of the person who wears it. The story extends beyond the person's fashion or lifestyle choices. It becomes you. It is you. Jewelry is your manifestation, a manifestation of who you are and what you're going through and what you are becoming. It is a non-verbal communication of style, relationships, faith, power, commitment, memories, and love. My love for the medium and creative process is what drew me to design as a subject. This again became my inspiration for my Class 12 project. The name I chose is a tribute to my mentor's business, Difference by Design, who made a difference through his guidance. I had very high expectations and visions, and I set out with ideas of delicate designs that I would love to wear myself. I was planning to spend most of my time with my external mentor, Alvin Hona, and at his studio and at home at my own workbench. But before I could even get going, I was rushed to hospital in December of last year. My life took a 180-degree turn and sent me on a total different journey that I never thought could happen to me. I was diagnosed with a rare rheumatoid autoimmune disease, and my journey started with very high cortisone. Now, almost 7 months later, I'm finally off the cortisone, and I'm starting to work through the withdrawal symptoms and the severe Cushing syndrome it has left me with. The problems I experienced were that my hands were weak and started shaking. The painful, stiff joints were preventing me from holding a pen or an instrument to continue my project. I was feeling tired all the time and disheartened, and the pain in my whole body was just unbearable. I was so fixed on my original ideas that I was extremely emotional and thought everything was lost. That is when Alvin stepped in, and he asked me, what was my aim for this project? What would happen if I couldn't do this? Would I be able to change my project? Alvin made me realize that it wasn't about the outcome or the end result, but the journey. He made me look at different options and problem solving and a plan B. He asked me to go home and look deep inside how and what I really wanted to achieve. Alvin took me under his wing and showed me that I could create the works from wax, and I learned a whole new technique of which I've only had a taste of what's yet to come. I had the most supportive mentor team with both Alvin and Andy, who checked in with me regularly and encouraged me all of the way. Thank you for your visits, Andy, and when I was going through the worst and thereafter. It was only around March I was physically able to start my wax work. The process was very slow at first, but Alvin was very patient and taught me as I went along. Due to my inability to work in fine detail as I planned, I had to change to bigger, less delicate, more basic and manageable designs. Hence, the ammonite pendant was created from an inspiration from a design I researched. The process I did is called hollow wax method. A wax model, or also called a core, is built up onto a base and cast in porcelain-like mix, which hardens. Then it is placed in a kiln and the wax is burnt out under extreme temperatures. In this way, the inside surface is created. This void space is then filled with a molten metal, in my case silver, through a spinning process. So I first started making the spirals out of blue coil wax, gently rolling it between the warmth of my fingers. For the bezel of the ammonite, I cut a strip from the pink wax plate to make a bezel to fit the ammonite. I fitted the bezel around the ammonite and with a hot instrument connected the two end pieces. I then cut out the excess wax off the bezel to create a flush edge with the ammonite, but also to ensure that the spirals and the ammonite were a similar height on the plate. I cut out an opening into the back of the area underneath the ammonite so that I could easily remove it before casting. I placed the bezel and the spirals on the plate and roughly cut out the shape I wanted. I then cut out the shape even closer to the bezel and the spirals to create a pleasing flow. Both the spirals and the bezel were attached to the plate with some melted wax. Because the items were so big, it needed to be placed at an angle with the short, flat wax sticks at strategic points so that the silver molten could reach all parts of the void. Then there was space for another pendant, but because it was round with flowers on, one entry point was not enough. So another bar was attached behind the pendant to go underneath the flowers. A few more items were attached as it's most cost effective to maximize the casting without cramming it too full. The base of the tree is used to measure how much silver one would need, plus a bit more. Once the casting is done, the pot is submerged in cold water and quite a lot of the porcelain mass comes off, and the casting can be taken out of the pot. Then it's off to the high-pressure water cabinet where the rest of the white mass is blown from the casting. The rough casting is placed into a solution to get the smaller pieces off and to clean the metal. The ultrasonic cleaner is then used afterwards, and a few blasts with a high-pressure air hose, and the big casting can be separated by cutting the items off the core, which is reusable for the next cast. The ammonite pendant was cleaned well, and afterwards the silver boards were created individually and welded between the spirals to create the effect. A good polish later and the pendant was ready. I cut out some flower shapes from the pink wax and molded them and added texture with an embossing instrument. The metal flower shapes were gifted to me and were originally used to make fondant flowers. These flowers were gently wiped off with a thin cloth and dipped in benzene. Alvin with his team, Mike and Anton, have supported me through this process. Building the wax trees with the wax objects I created, casting, cleaning, polishing, setting the ammonite and the pearls. I had to decide whether to use a silver necklace or a rubber cord to suspend the pendants from. Not only was this project about the design and creation, but I needed to look at the business side and costs of manufacturing and pricing the items. It opened my eyes to reality of manufacturing and how much I had to consider and include in my calculations. I drew up my prices of my items available on request and would love them to find their rightful wearer to enjoy what I had the pleasure of creating. To finance this project, my mom and Cam have assisted me. Alvin has made this process possible, but I need to reimburse him for the materials and other costs. For this purpose, I would like to and need to sell my items to repay him. From the bottom of my heart, I would like to thank Alvin and Andy. You have been the wind in my sails and the voice in my head in times of despair, and had me realize that to succeed is to be truthful about myself and my intentions, to be flexible and to think of options. When something doesn't work, mouth the wax and start again. To quote Ed Sheeran, you learn nothing from success, nothing. You learn everything from failures. Success happens from failing 100 of times. I will be available at my table for a chat to answer any further questions. Beauty is who you are. Joy is simply the icing on the cake. With this, I'm announcing interval. I invite you to please support the Class 13s at the refreshment table. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Sydney Brown, and for my Class 12 project, I chose to explore music and the role it plays in my life by writing, recording, and performing an EP. I made it my mission to become an artist, a real musician with pride and confidence in what I can produce and perform. My Class 12 project. It's incredibly surreal to be standing here today, having completed it. It's hard to describe the feeling of having gone my entire life with a milestone like this waiting up the road ahead of me, and to now have it in my rearview mirrors. I feel incredibly proud and excited, but at the same time, sad to be leaving it behind. Music has always been a big part of my life, not in an overbearing, takes over my everyday existence kind of way, but in the sense that there has never been a time where I haven't been surrounded by music. This is mostly thanks to my dad. He was in a band when he was younger and later became a sound engineer, and he's done an excellent job at passing on his passions to his children. I started having singing lessons around the age of 10, which is when my journey with music really began. Since then, I've benefited from some really amazing teachers, and I've grown to absolutely love performing. For the past couple of years, I've been at the School of Rock, where I've had the opportunity to perform on some really amazing stages around Cape Town. Music exists everywhere, from your phone to stadiums to deep in the Amazon rainforest. Regardless of where you are from or going, in some way, music will reach and influence everybody, igniting feelings of power, loss, or happiness. My love of singing and performing, as well as these powerful, random qualities that music possesses, is what led me to my Class 12 project topic. If I can make even one person feel the way I feel listening to music or watching a performance, I will be happy. For the last few years, I've been learning to write songs, and I found it extremely rewarding and in many ways therapeutic, which leads me to the first aspect of my Class 12 project, songwriting. I love lyrics, melodies, dynamics, and the relationships they have with one another in a song. I love lyrics when lyrics move me or confuse me or approach an idea from a new perspective. And I love when I love a song. My obsession and appreciation for these elements of songs often makes me hypercritical of the things I create myself, because I'm constantly striving to feel the same way about my own songs as I do about other people's. This project has highlighted for me just how much I love lyrics and storytelling, and has been a great opportunity for me to take that love for it further and practice writing. Songwriting is not something I find very easy to do. Articulating how I feel has always been hard for me, and this has definitely carried over into my songwriting. However, I've also learned that songwriting is a skill, and like any skill, it can be improved upon. Over the last 6 months, I've learned writing techniques and tools, and written some lyrics that I'm really happy with. The second aspect of my Class 12 project was taking these songs I'd written and recording my EP. In the beginning of the year, I was working with someone who had a full-time job and was trying to help me in his spare time. He was really helpful, and I'm so grateful for his efforts and advice about the industry, but in the end, it just wasn't working, and the best way forward was for me to explore other options. This left me on the back foot. I was halfway through April and pretty much back to square one.
Moving on from this challenge felt very overwhelming, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because it led me to working with Concept Records, which is a studio in Rondebosch run by the two most amazing guys who helped my ambitions become reality. Recording was not something I knew anything about before the Class 12 projects. I only knew what I had heard from my dad and seen online, but I'd never had real experience in a studio. I enjoyed every second of the recording process, recording my vocals, being in the studio environment with an engineer, and watching the little tunes I'd written on the floor of my bedroom and lounge become real songs. Another thing I loved about recording my music was the new perspective it gave me on the songs themselves. While recording, the relationship I had with my songs changed, and I started to appreciate each one for something different and new. Being in the studio for every step of the recording process, for every step that goes into making a song, also made me hear all music completely differently. Now, when I listen to a song, I can imagine all the creative choices that were made, because I had to make them. It was a strange feeling to be the one in control. I was the boss. These are my songs, and I was the only one who knew what they needed to sound like. I had to be clear about what I liked and didn't like, and trust myself even when I felt like I really wasn't the one qualified to be making the decisions. The third aspect of my Class 12 project was performing. Originally, I intended performing to be at the center of my project. And I set out with some rather ambitious plans to gig all over Cape Town and take a trip to busk in the UK. But, as I've learned is to be expected, the Class 12 projects are shapeshifters. And the performing side of my project evolved to become less about the actual performances and more about me gaining confidence in my abilities and my ability to perform. Before the project process, no one except my parents had ever heard a song I had written, and I did not have a spontaneous bone in my body when it came to singing. Over the course of the projects, this has changed. I played my songs for friends and family, admittedly sometimes with forceful prompting from my mom, and I have written songs that I am really proud of. One of the most fulfilling parts about my project, and unexpected parts, was seeing people's reactions and hearing people's reactions to my music. Although it wasn't my focus, I was still determined to perform. I performed at school concert, the student market, and my dad's birthday. And a bit more significantly, next week I am going to a music expo in Joburg to sing with my band from the School of Rock, and I will be doing a solo set as well, including some original songs. One of the standout experiences I had during this process was visiting the Massey Violin Outreach, which is a non-profit organization that exposes children of all ages to quality music education through the playing of violin. My singing teacher, Nadia, runs the organization, and she invited me to join her there for a day, help keep the children busy, play a bit of piano, and sing for them. This wasn't a huge part of my project, but it did highlight something for me. I am so lucky to be in the position I am today, recording music, releasing music, attending Constantia Waldorf School, and able to look back on my 18 years and know that I've had the opportunity to do almost everything and anything I've wanted throughout my life. Unfortunately, I know this isn't the case for everyone, and organizations like the Massey Violin Outreach are doing their best to combat that fact. I have a QR code to their website at my stand, where you can donate to their cause or learn more if you're interested. My Class 12 project truly has been an amazing experience. It has given me the time and encouragement to pursue something of real significance in my life, made me excited about my future, and taught me more than I ever imagined it would. People have often said to me how their project taught them so much more than what their project was actually about during their 12th year. And until now, I really wasn't sure what they meant, but I think I get it. I've gained confidence in myself and my ability to take control of my life. I can now send an email without supervision from my mom, and I am comfortable communicating in a professional setting. All of this being said, most importantly, I stand in front of you today with a product that I am proud to present. My EP is available on all streaming platforms, so go home and listen. And if anyone is feeling old school and still has a CD player, I am selling limited edition CDs at my stand. My EP is composed of 5 songs that I've written over the past few years that illustrate events and feelings that I've experienced, but rarely vocalized. They are very personal and mean a lot to me, but I'm also so excited to let them go and become yours. They are ready for your ears and to adapt to the circumstances of your life. I'm going to be singing for you in a minute, but for the past couple of weeks, I've been deliberating constantly about which song I'm going to sing for you. And then I was rehearsing on Wednesday for this, and I asked Mr. Mercer, what song should I do? And he said, do both. I was very hesitant to do this because I've been up here for a while already. But part of my project has been about taking the opportunities that come my way. And so I will be playing 2 songs for you. Before I do, I would like to take a minute to thank a few people, of course. Firstly, thank you to my external mentor, Simon. He has been with me from the beginning of this process and helped me with everything. He recorded guitars for me, helped me rehearse my songs, and gave me constant advice and opinions when needed. Thank you to my internal mentor, Anya, for keeping me on track and never failing to put my mind at ease. To Concept Records, specifically Ben, who's not able to be here tonight, but for making this all possible and answering my many, many amateur questions. To my singing teacher, Nadia, for her constant enthusiasm and encouragement, and for recording string parts for me. To my mom, for always listening to me and rationalizing my irrational thoughts. To my brothers, for always being so supportive. And a special thanks to Harvey, my youngest brother. And he insisted I say this, actually, but he actually came up with the title of my EP, so thank you, Harvey. Thank you to Nanette for helping me with my CDs very last minute. Thank you to Rosie for taking photos for me, which is not an easy task. I don't like being in front of the camera. To all the people who supported my backer buddy. And then finally, thank you to my dad. He's been my chauffeur, my producer, my advisor, and biggest support from day one. And none of this would have been possible without him. Okay, now on to the best part. This is Simon, by the way, my external mentor. So the first song I'm going to sing is called This Spring, and it's the first song on my EP. It's getting loud in here, and it's gonna rain, I fear. Sorry to disappoint. Loneliness in the crowd. I know that's not allowed. Carry on, please enjoy it. There is too much to do. I'll never be like you. Sorry to bring you down. Water's too cold to smile. My body's never inside. Maybe I'll come around. Always something on my mind. Watch the walls until they dry. World is wide and it is small. Can't define it all. Just try to go with the flow. Let it go. Let it go. I'm scared of the sun sometimes. Skirts that will show my thighs. Don't you worry about me. Is that really what you think? I'm delicate and the same.
should have loved this rain before. One thing will always be true: I'll never be like you. Always something on my mind. Watch the walls until they dry. World is wide and it is small. Can't define it all. Just try to go with the flow. 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 Let it go. Let it go. Okay, so this one is the last song on my EP, and it is called Bloodshot Eyes. I need to be where you are. Any distance is too far. Loneliness creeps in my thoughts. Overthinking forcibly falling from grace to the ground. I'm scared to disturb. Will the crash make a sound? So I soak in the pain and slowly sinking. Somebody read my If somebody reads my bloodshot eyes.
I hope you all don't expect me to sing. But I would also be lying if I said that that wasn't a tough act to follow. But that was amazing singing, and I've got birds. Yeah. Well, good evening all. For those that don't know me, my name isn't Luke. It's actually Matthew, but let's not get into that. And for my Class 12 project, I developed an intimate knowledge of a sewage works, dug a car out of sand, and shouted at a monkey. Thank you. For the record, I actually wanted that to be my entire speech. It pretty much encapsulates the project, but apparently that was unacceptable. So here goes. Something my external mentor told me during our first official meeting was that there are 5 types of birders. And he is here tonight. Ian, please forgive me, I'm going to get this very wrong. But the 5 types of birders are the scientist, the adventurer, the lister, the aesthetics, and the appreciator. The scientist is someone who loves the statistical side of birding. They enjoy the idea of birds as numbers on a page, whether that be maps, statistics, distributions, populations, etc. The adventurer is someone who prefers birding further afield and will rarely be found close to home. These people enjoy visiting exotic and far-flung locations and don't mind a long drive. Then we have the lister. This is someone who is obsessed with seeing as many species as possible. Someone who goes to extraordinary lengths just to see a lifer, a first ever sighting. Then we have the aesthetics guy. This is someone who loves the way a bird looks and channels their appreciation through various mediums, whether photography, drawing, painting, or any other such means. And last, but not least, we have the appreciator. These are the everyday birders. They prefer to enjoy birds in their everyday life, as opposed to obsessing about lists or rarities. All birders, to some extent, are a mixture of some or all of these. Rare is the birder who fits only one category. It's quite a simple notion, actually, but the idea stuck with me. For what kind of birder was I? At the time, I told Ian that I considered myself a scientific bird. After all, I liked the idea of maps, populations, studies, distributions, and other stuff like that. But this did not seem to fit. I also added that I considered myself a bit of an adventurer. I mean, my family and I went on trips to nature reserves and national parks all the time, and that made sense. Lastly, I added that I was a bit of an appreciator. After all, my birding up until that point had been mostly limited to the everyday sort. What I certainly did not consider myself was an aesthetics man. Even though one of the main aspects of my project was photography, I didn't think I'd like this very much, as I only enjoy what I'm good at. That goes to show just how much this project is of self-discovery and change. And I can tell you, I did a fair amount of both. The other day I was reading through my original proposal, when I realized just how much I have deviated from it. Granted, I allowed that this project was subject to change, but in my mind, I had already set my course. I was intent upon bird photography and bird atlasing. For those that don't know, bird atlasing is the process of recording one's sightings, bird sightings that is, within a certain area and within a certain time frame. The whole of southern Africa is divided up into 9 by 7 kilometer squares. These squares are called pentads. All one's records from within a certain pentad form a trip card. These trip cards are then uploaded to an Atlas Project database, where they form part of a map, useful for conservation or everyday enjoyment. Enjoyment for birders, that is. I wouldn't recommend doing it if you're not interested. Because of this, I thought I would enjoy atlasing most, as I consider myself very scientifically minded, which just goes to show the best people can be wrong at times. I began enjoying photography more and more, and suddenly found I had a knack for it. All of a sudden, my project began going in entirely unexpected directions, and I was confronted with a new problem. All of these enterprises and innovations could not fit under my original proposal, so I had to reinvent it, remake it, reform it, and so I did. This project is now my birding big year. For those that don't know, a big year is a common term among birders used to signify a year spent trying to see as many species as possible. My own take on it is slightly different, although I did try to see as many birds as possible, believe me. My birding big year is, put simply, the biggest year in my birding adventure. It is the year that I became a proper birder. Let me try to illustrate exactly what that looked like. During the course of this project, I have completed and uploaded 93 trip cards covering 13 pentads to the South African Bird Atlas Project, SABAP 2. I have taken 9,851 photographs. Whether you think that many of you, as the person who had to go through and edit them all, I can tell you it's a lot. I have been to countless amazing and stunning locations, such as Namakwaland National Park, where the car got stuck in sand and I had to dig it out with a poop shovel. The Richtersveld National Park, where I swore extravagantly, and let me emphasize the extravagantly in that, at a vervet monkey who had just stolen my loaf of bread. Yes, it was very early in the morning and I just don't want to get into it. I spent 2 days in the ever delightful Makala National Park, and during that time I saw 93 species of bird, a personal record. Then there's West Coast National Park, the place I went to the day after the Class 12 plays had finished, and I was running on about 4 hours of sleep. Yeah. And last, but not least, yes, it sounds horrible, but Strandfontein Sewage Works. It's actually a remarkably nice place, believe it or not. I also have no sense of smell, so that helps. But yeah. I have also become a member of the Cape Bird Club, a club for Cape Tonian birders, and a member of BirdLife South Africa, an NGO dedicated to avian conservation in this here country. I will soon be a published writer, with an article of mine coming out this November in a birding magazine. Additionally, I have seen nearly 300 species of bird this year, and have no plans on slowing down, so yeah. But now, 10 minutes is really not nearly long enough for me to explain the full extent of my project, or to convey its personal significance and impact on me. So instead, I'll leave you with something I learned. During the course of this project, I've had the privilege of being able to spend a great deal of time immersed in the finest strongholds of nature that this world still has to offer. And most of that time was given over to gentle contemplation. As a Christian, I have a deep and abiding connection with nature. I have a feeling that there's a lot to learn from it. A creation should tell something about its creator, should it not? Just as from looking at a child, one can tell something about their parents. So it was as I was watching the sun set over the golden grassland plains in Makala National Park, when I was struck by the serenity of the scene that lay before me, and particularly the singularity of one solitary savanna tree. While I was here, immersed in this, the finest nature, the cares of life were weighing particularly heavy on me. Nature, on the other hand, was not worried about anything at all. It was simply doing exactly what it was put there to do, and was the happier for it. I think that's something we, in this fast-paced modern world, could do with remembering. We are here for a reason, and the happiest we can be is when we're doing all that we're supposed to be doing, and not worrying about things we can't change. So, should you forget everything about my project, and granted, I don't blame you if you do, it's quite boring, but if you do, I pray that you'll just remember that one thing. Thank you. I was testing you, you jumped the gun, you thought I was ungrateful and I wasn't going to say thanks, but yes. I would like to say a massive thank you to a lot of people, most of whom are here tonight. I would like to say the biggest thank you to Magenta, my internal mentor, who has helped me with a lot, and who has shot down some very extravagant plans, which I am grateful for. My sleep schedule is especially grateful for that. Ian, who is my external mentor, he has helped me through a lot and was a massive help with getting this project started. I mean, just getting it off the ground was the biggest thing, and he was absolutely instrumental. And then I would absolutely love to thank my family, who have been very patient with me throughout this whole birding excursion and have, yes, been to Strandfontein sewage works. Yes, they have. Guys, can we have a round of applause for my family? They've been for a lot.
I am Nicholas, and for my Castro project, I proposed to make a comic book, but instead I got sidetracked and instead made 2. And exhibited at Comic-Con Cape Town this year. I wrote, drew, and colored a comic book and attempted to go about it in a professional way. And one of the more difficult parts of it was selling it, but as you have demonstrated today, maybe it's not that hard. And I wanted to make a comic book that was most importantly enjoyable to read. One of the main inspirations for my comic is the European, or specifically Francophone, school of comics, or bandes dessinées, meaning drawn strips. Famous examples being Tintin and Asterix, among others like Lucky Luke or Yokotsuno or Blake and Mortimer and others, as well as some local examples which I was inspired by. And to create a comic, the first thing that is required is an idea. And normally I outsource these to the Philippines. But this time, when the opportunity arose to exhibit at Comic-Con, my application was only accepted quite close to the actual date of the convention. So I had only a short amount of time to make the comic, about a month or so. And so I used an idea that I had came up previously. This is for this comic I'm referring to, which I had jotted down in the sketchbook a couple of months prior. Now, this that you see on the screen here is what is referred to as writing with pictures, or storyboarding. It is essentially a very rough preliminary draft of the comic, which has all of the necessary story elements, like characters, character positions, and dialogue, but it's not at all a finished piece. When I am satisfied with how the story has turned out, I then move on to drawing onto a large sheet, which will later be reduced for printing because it makes the drawings look a lot neater, into this stage called penciling, in which as the name suggests, I draw it in pencil in a neat fashion, and ensure that all the character poses, expressions, and environments are as I want them to be in the finished product. Then I add lettering, which is adding the letters onto the page. Cartoonists are not so original with naming things. And I use ruled pencil guidelines to ensure that it's legible. Then, once that's complete, I go over the pencil lines with ink. I use various different types of pens, one of which can be seen over there, and the ink is waterproof to ensure that it doesn't smudge, it's essentially very permanent ink. Then the pencils underneath the inks are erased, and then the page is scanned to be printed. This is the drawing board that I was working on. You can see it on my stand over there. It is tilted at an angle so that I can look at the drawings straight on, as opposed to looking at them flat, which this reduces strain on the upper back from looking down, and prevents mistakes in perspective from looking at it flat. For some pages, I also use this tool called a light box, which shines a light through one page, which has pencil illustrations on it, onto a second sheet of paper, which is overlaid, and so I can ink on top of that piece of paper, removing the necessity of erasing the pencil drawings. Although I had made many comics before as a hobby, one new skill that I learned for this project was how to color comics using a digital program. The program I used was Clip Studio Paint, and I had my external mentor to help with this, as well as some helpful tips from my classmate Misha. And this was the most difficult and time-consuming part for me, because not only am I not very familiar with computers, but also I'm red-green colorblind and have difficulty distinguishing the colors. So selecting the colors and placing the colors on the page was actually very easy once I learned how to do it, but actually selecting the colors took a very long time. Here are examples of 2 finished color pages. The color comic that I made was made after the convention, which I will talk about in a little bit, and can be seen in this little booklet. Now, about the convention, you see here I have a lanyard. It makes me feel important. Earlier this year, I received an email from a friend of mine called Alex, whom, like my external mentor, I had also met through a local cartooning group, so essentially a group where people meet and draw comics together, called Toonza, or Toon, short for cartoon, ZA, Zuid Africa. And it was a forwarded email from a program or an initiative run by the City of Cape Town called the Emerging Artists Program, who were offering the opportunity to exhibit at Comic-Con Cape Town for free. Normally it costs about 3,500 rand, and I quite like free things. So what I did is I responded to the email and sent them a portfolio of my work, so comics and illustrations, and was accepted. And then there was a preliminary exhibition before Comic-Con, and then the convention itself. This was a 5-day event, longer than normal because of the public holiday that, on the 1st of May this year. The event was from the 28th of April until the 1st of May. And it had about 30,000 visitors. So I launched my comic book at the convention. Unfortunately, I do not have many good pictures of it, but I do have these 2 taken by a very obliging photographer who was working for the Emerging Artists Program. You can probably guess which one's posed. And it was very tiring. Essentially, it consisted of constantly standing behind a table and trying to sell the comic to passers-by. It involved a lot of standing and a lot of talking. So after 5 days, I was very tired. This is like I said earlier, the comic I released at the convention. And then after this, I learned how to do digital coloring and made the other one. This is a project that I enjoyed immensely because it was essentially an excuse to do what I like and say it's schoolwork. At the convention, I met many interesting characters, not only the ones from comic books, but others as well. And I also met many local cartoonists and international ones, and made many valuable connections. So, have very little else to say. Other than thank you for listening and have a good evening. And if you have bought my book, please enjoy reading it. And if you don't enjoy it, don't tell me.
Don't worry, I'm the last one. After this. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mr. Tate. It's so long ago now that we decided on our project topics. In the beginning, I had no idea what on earth I was going to do for this project, and I thought about it for quite some time. Then finally, I had decided to do animal and nature photography. People in my family had always told me that I was good at photography, so I decided to give it a go. I could finally start my project in the December holidays after receiving a camera from my family for Christmas. I was very excited to have my own camera and to be able to finally start my Class 12 project. Over the next few weeks, I began to experiment with photography by doing research and taking pictures of my cats, since I wasn't able to take pictures of wild animals yet. Over time, though, I became less sure about my project topic and had no idea how I was going to go about doing it. Also in the December holidays, I had become very interested in art. Then the idea came to me that I could combine my photography and art by drawing animals into pictures that I took. I didn't take this idea seriously until I found some art of Johann Thorqvist, who was my main inspiration for this project. Johann Thorqvist is a Swedish illustrator. When I came across his art, I realized that my idea could work well in my own way. It was like a switch had been flipped, and I had to change my project topic. So I switched to a project where I go out into nature most of the time and take pictures, and then draw animals into those pictures. I'm really happy that my project took this turn. It combined two things that I really love and turned into something that I really cared about. So how did I go about doing this project? I started out by going to several locations, such as Kirstenbosch, Silvermine Dam, Boulders Beach, and my own garden. When I went to these locations, I took as many pictures as I could. Most of these pictures would be considered very bad, since they did not have a main subject and were very bland. But that was one of the key parts of the pictures that I needed to take. These pictures could either have no main subject, or a subject that could support the animal that I wanted to draw. I probably took around 1,000 photos throughout this process, and only used 11 of them in my final artworks. When I was finished with the pictures, taking the pictures, I edited the ones that I wanted to use for my art. When I was done editing them, I loaded them up into the software that I used to draw. In the beginning, I used Krita to do my digital art, and later on brought Clip Studio Paint when I decided I wanted to go further with art after school. I drew my art with a small Wacom drawing tablet that I had bought a few years ago for a video game. But I'm really happy that I made this purchase, because if I didn't, I wouldn't have been able to do this project. The time I spent drawing each piece was around 2 to 3 hours, excluding the time that I needed to take the pictures, edit them, and find references. Sometimes, however, I would not draw a thing for weeks at a time, because I couldn't think of any ideas that would work well. I'll now show you some before and afters of pictures that I took and the final product. Then, once I was done with the art, I went on to post-processing and printing. I did a lot of test prints throughout this process. I would have to do test prints, then more test prints, and then more test prints when I had made more art, taken more pictures, and edited previous works that had failed. I would say that my biggest struggle throughout this project was procrastination and staying motivated. I've struggled with these issues for years now, but with the support of my peers and my family, and the topic being something I really cared about, I was able to push through it. I feel like the highlight of this project for me was definitely drawing these animals. I thought the process of doing this was extremely fun. Sometimes I got frustrated that I couldn't figure out what to do with a certain picture, or what I was trying to do just wasn't working. Then, after all the frustration, finding something that worked well and looked good to me was a really great feeling. It was like making a puzzle and trying to figure out what pieces would go where. I simply started out doing this art with the mindset of wanting to draw animals into pictures. Then, over time, this mindset slowly shifted into wanting to make the animals seem as if they are meant to be there and that they are at home. I also try to minimize the space that is taken up by the animals, as to not take away from the environment that is around them. I'm overall really happy with how this project turned out, and it taught me so much about art, photography, and myself. With this project, I learned how much I love art. I gained new skills with that art and photography. I gained confidence in myself and my ability to achieve my goals. I also decided that I wanted to move forward with art and make a career out of it eventually. I feel that this project also shows my journey with art over the past few months, as I was trying to get better with every piece that I made. I would really like to thank my mentors Jane Eastwood and Simon Taylor for helping me all the way through this process and for giving me so much useful feedback and advice. I would also like to thank my family for funding this project and providing me with the resources that I needed to get the work done. I would also like to thank all of you for coming to see these projects, and I hope you come back to support tomorrow.
I definitely don't deserve to be up here. Class 12, everybody. I speak on behalf of Constantia Waldorf School, your parents, your friends, your family, and everybody that has been here over the weekend when I say that we are immensely proud of everything that you guys have managed to do in the past 9 months. Or 12 years if you've been here long enough. Some of you more than 12 years if you've been here since playgroup and kindergarten. And all of this ultimately has been the culmination of your Waldorf experience. So from our side, a very, very well done. We are proud of you, and we look forward to what you are going to achieve in your lives, individually and as a group. So myself and Magenta, as you can see there, are very proud mom and dad at the moment. And the next time I think I stand in front of all of you in this hall will be for the final assembly, where we get to acknowledge you one last time before you take on your matric finals. So thank you to all of you for coming out. Safe home, please, and class 12, if you're going to be celebrating, do so safely. Thank you.